Hello again, YouTube. My name is Bree, and today I'm going to be filming a sketchbook tour. So this sketchbook is special to me because it is a travel sketchbook, as you probably saw in the title, and this sketchbook is responsible for capturing all of my memories from my trip to Scotland that occurred last October. This was not a plein air sketchbook, which was originally my goal, but we just didn't have enough time, and you'll probably see what I mean as we go through it. So please excuse my rambling. This is going to be different for me because I'm not used to recording and both video and audio at the same time, and I'm going to just try to do this in one shot, and we'll see how it goes. So without further ado, here's my sketchbook. I do want to point out that the sketchbook does actually have a band on it, but my cat did eat it, so I had to replace it. So it normally had one that looked like that. I shouldn't say ate it. She chewed it, she ripped it, or destroyed it, but she didn't consume it. So hooray for that. So this little band was replaced by just a piece of washi tape. This is the A5 Etcher sketchbook. You've seen my A6 and A4 before. They came in a 3-pack, so this is the third one of the group, and it has cold pressed paper. Everything inside was done with Daniel Smith watercolors and a couple others, mostly Daniel Smith. If you're interested in seeing a separate video where I go through the actual supplies I brought with me when I traveled, let me know. So, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I wanted to do when I started the sketchbook was to create a bit of a calendar for the trip itself. I am the type of person who always has my planner with me, and for this trip I really wanted to minimize the amount of things I packed, and the planner was the part that got eliminated. So I just created a bit of a calendar of everywhere we were going, my flight numbers, and every bit of information I'd need that I would normally keep in my planner. And then there's a little map that you probably can't see too well, but it has like little dots for everywhere we were going. And then I do enjoy occasionally doing some lettering, but then I get tired of it because I fatigue very easily there. And then on the next page, this the writing in the sketchbook that came in on this page and the next one, is no longer in the Etcher sketchbook, so if that is unappealing to you, don't worry, they removed it. But the first day of the trip, my husband and I flew up to meet with our in-laws who we were traveling with, and our flight was delayed. So while we were at the airport, I decided to sketch the things I brought with me. So I have my 40-liter Osprey bag, my Timbuktu messenger bag, who unfortunately, this was its last trip. I had this bag for over 10 years, and it went all over the United States in the 3 different countries, and it hit its limit, so rest in peace, little bag. I also had this collapsible Pusheen bag that folds up into this tiny little square. Sorry for bumping the camera. And so I brought this with me just to bring some extra stuff back. A collapsible water bottle, headphones, my sketchbook, and a little Etcher palette, paintbrush, water container, Kindle, my wallet, my passport, and my little adapter. So besides clothes and bathroom items, this was pretty much all I packed. I kept it really light, which is not easy for me. So the first day of the trip, I guess the first real day of the trip, we left kind of in the evening from Dulles Airport. And I was kind of excited because I've always wanted to see a Boeing 747 up close and be able to go in one. I mean, it's not really the same when you don't get to go hang out in the top, because we definitely flew peasant class, but it was still cool. So at the airport, I made sure to paint the airplane while we were waiting and while I was consuming my overly sized coffee, because I was already exhausted and I can't sleep on planes. So being exhausted is pretty much a theme for this trip. And then we landed in Edinburgh the next day, and I guess we got there kind of in the afternoon, around noon. And then by the time we checked into our hotel and grabbed lunch, we really didn't have too much time. We were with this tour, Brendan Vacations or Trafalgar, and so for the first day we met in the evening for our introduction / first meal, get to know people, and so we just had a little bit of time to walk around and see some things. It was raining for the first couple days, so there definitely wasn't any plein air sketching, but I did draw a couple like building toppers. This was actually a clock on the street in the middle of a sidewalk. So I painted these. I think I drew them that evening and started painting them later. We did spend a lot of time on a bus with this trip, and I had these grand ideas of, well, if I can't draw on site, I'll do it on the bus, but I got horribly car sick, so that didn't really work out either. I guess motion sick. So then the next day we went to Edinburgh Castle, kind of one of the landmarks of Edinburgh. It's this massive castle that's on top of a volcanic plug. So you get to see it looking up, which is really cool. I kind of wish we had a nicer day for that because I imagine it's gorgeous on a clear day. And then we went up there and actually toured the castle. So that was a lot of fun. One thing I should have pointed out earlier, at this point, I had like no experience drawing buildings or landscapes. I had the best of intentions to study up and become great at plein air painting. And pretty much I spent all of my time leading up to this trip just instead learning watercolor properties because I wanted to pick the perfect palette, especially when I was only planning to bring like 12 colors. Very much got distracted and never really studied. So I think I did get better over time, but buildings are not my strong suit. So this cannon was really cool. This was a gigantic cannon called Mons Meg, and it could shoot up to like 2 miles. They had this big like device for moving it about, but it was pretty stationary for the most part. One cool fact about Edinburgh Castle that I really liked was that apparently Scottish people are thrifty. I think the word they used was actually cheap. And so typically at castles or forts like this, they'll fire off a cannon 12 times at noon, but they were smart and decided, you know what? Let's just do it at 1 o'clock and fire one cannon and be done with it. And yeah, I appreciated that. So this was just also somewhere up in the castle. There was this cool little building front, and then I had this idea I was going to be drawing all these little gargoyles because they are so cool. It didn't really happen, but I love gargoyles. And then after we visited the castle, we were cold, we were damp, so we went to a tea room. That was another thing I really wanted to do on this trip, was visit a tea room. So I got this amazing lentil soup, which became one of my staples for the rest of the trip. A scone. I finally got my scone with my jam and clotted cream. It was great. So the next day, we went to 2 different abbeys. This part of the tour was called Excursion to the Borders, though we didn't go all the way to the English border. But first we visited this abbey, Jedburgh, which we saw from the outside and kind of wandered around, and then went over to the Mary Queen of Scots house, which is just down the road. But as you can see, it was kind of open and there wasn't much to see, so we didn't spend as much time here, but I really liked it, just this shape in the windows. And then afterwards we went to Melrose Abbey, and this one was way cool. We actually got to go inside, walk up the staircases. Some of them were still usable, so we really got to explore here. Another rainy, damp day, but it did clear up long enough where I was able to come through to, there was a museum here, and I sat outside and sketched this. So I actually got to draw something on site. It was very exciting for me. Unfortunately, it started raining before I got to paint. But then we went into the town of Melrose, which was super cute. And like there was little alleyways between the buildings with these really pretty gardens that you could look at. And then we got food there, like those pastries, the pastry crust with like meat inside. I got one that was curry chicken. It was so good. So then we went back to Edinburgh, and I didn't really paint much there. The day we finally got some clear weather, and we just really enjoyed it. This was a building I was very fond of. It's more Gothic style, very dark, but then it has these like crazy neon orange and yellow windows that I really like this. So when it lit up, it was really pretty. And then just drew some flowers. The Scottish thistle is the national flower of Scotland, which, yeah, it's spiky and not the most pretty, but it fits. And then that night we went on a ghost tour, which was more like the dark side of Edinburgh, and it was pretty neat. Learned about a lot of their experience during the plague, and of course there's the traditional ghost story. We got to walk around Greyfriars, the wow, I'm blinking, sorry, the cemetery kirkyard at night, and so that was a little creepy, but not really my normal thing, but we had fun. And then the next day, we finally left Edinburgh. I say finally, we were only there for like 2.5 days. And then we went to, our goal for that evening, we were staying in, as they called it, the UNESCO city of Dundee. But on the way, we stopped by St. Andrews, and we got to go to both the ruins of the cathedral and the castle. So we basically had an option here about going to either the golf course, which is obviously a major attraction for St. Andrews, or just kind of wander the city, the town. It was really pretty. I really liked this town. This place was just so cool. And then we got to play along the shore here at the North Sea, which was just nice. We collected some rocks and I don't know, just enjoyed a relaxing day. Our morning, and then afterwards we kind of wandered the town and saw the university, which is really pretty, and got coffee because I was already surviving on coffee pretty much exclusively at this point. After we left here, we went to Glamis Castle, and this was our wristband. I taped in some things, but I really didn't keep everything. And this was a really cool castle. So first of all, it was intact. We hadn't really seen a castle that was intact at this point in the trip. And so to see it all set up where they're still doing dinners there was really cool. Glamis was basically rebuilt, or the family was brought back into glory by this eccentric named Patrick. And he was something. Like, there's paintings of him, and he had this leather armor that was shaped like a new torso. It was really bizarre and brought me much joy. So I actually kind of wanted to paint him and never did. But yeah, I really like this castle. I like the red vines kind of crawling everywhere. There was like a statue of Apollo here. I'm a big mythology fan, so I'm sorry, not Apollo, Mercury. I am totally switching terminology. I apologize. But yeah, I really liked it. And then they had these cute little gardens. This fountain I painted mostly because it looked like he was getting sick, and I'm mature, so that brought me way too much amusement. And then back by the gardens, they had these chickens, and I had never drawn a chicken before, and I love them, so painted a chicken. Didn't get to spend as much time in the gardens. We kind of walked around quickly, took a couple photos, and then went back to see the Highland cattle. Basically, because of how much stuff we did every day, a place like this castle, we got to stay for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But there were a lot of places we didn't spend that much time, so that's part of why most of the painting happened after I got home. I really did want to have more opportunity to paint there, but I don't have any regrets. There was so much to see and learn, and it was a blast. So then we went back to Dundee, the UNESCO city of Dundee, which was known for a lot of its work on ships. And they actually did have a museum for the RRS Discovery, the Royal Research Ship, which was the ship that brought Robert Falcon Scott and others to the Antarctic. I don't remember why, but at one point in my life I did a lot of reading on this topic, so that was very exciting to me. Plus they had these little penguin statues everywhere. Unfortunately, the museum was closed. Sorry, my computer made a noise and I was afraid it turned off. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was way cool to see this in person. Just to imagine that a ship built in the early 1900s was capable of going to such rough terrain and still exists today, it's mind-boggling to me. So we stayed in Dundee that night, and we didn't really do too much else there. I have stupid priorities sometimes, and I'm a big fan of the show The Great British Bake Off, so I was a little too excited to actually be able to watch it live and see if they had any differences between the American showing and the British showing. So yeah, I went home to the hotel early that night. And then the next morning, the first stop was Blair Athol, which is a whiskey distillery. Scotch. But yeah, I just pinned this in. It has the whole distilling process. I'm not a drinker myself, but I did make exceptions for this trip because I did want to taste it right from the source. I'd had some whiskey in, or what they consider scotch in Japan, so had to try the real thing. But yeah, it was a pretty place. There is zero emissions location, so they have this massive Virginia creeper growing all over all the buildings that takes in all the carbon dioxide that the distilling process produces, and it's just very healthy for the environment. They had this gorgeous river running through it that's used to help make the whiskey, and it was good stuff. So I brought home a little bottle for my brother. It was fun. Then we went to see a sheepdog training demonstration. And because normally this time of year they wouldn't have sheep left to shear, but apparently in Scotland, a lot of farmers just let the sheep roam. Not farmers, shepherds let the sheep roam, and they tag them with paint or a pigment marker so they know which ones are theirs. And when it comes time to shear them, they just bring them in. This particular shepherd had lost a set of his sheep. They kind of went to tall grasses and stayed there until the rains brought the water level higher, and then they all came home. So we actually did get to see a demonstration of that as well, and do a couple snips, which, yeah, kind of cool. And then he had this cute little puppy that was just watching everything, learning the process. But yeah, the seeing how the dogs worked was neat, though I can't imagine living this lifestyle. I'm way too spoiled here with my modern technology, and it was definitely different, and I have a lot of respect for the work they do. And then we stayed in a town called Carbridge that night, which I think it was partly because of the time of year, although it was very small anyway. There wasn't much there, but there was this really pretty pack horse bridge from the 1700s that was right across from our hotel, so I had to paint it. It was really nice. And then we went to the battlefield of Culloden. So I'm sure if anyone watches Outlander, you're familiar with this already because people referenced it 8 trillion times during the trip. So I hadn't watched the show. I had heard some things about it that made me go, it's okay, it's not for me. But because my name's Brianna, apparently that's a character in the show, everyone assumed I was a massive fan. But yeah. Anyway, Culloden, if you're not aware, is the final battle site of the Jacobite Rising, which was, for a long time, they thought it was a battle between the Scottish and the English back in, I have the date written down on here, 1746. But apparently, more recently, they've really come to realize it was the Catholics and the Protestants. The Jacobites lost. It was sad, but the museum was really neat. I think it's on the back. It was structured very differently than what I'm used to. So you walk through this little museum, and on one side it gives you one side of the story, and then on the opposite wall it gives you the other. So you get to see how both groups were learning information, reacting, responding, and then it led up to a little video to represent the final battle. And then you could go outside and see the battlefield and the different stones that mark the sites for all those who fought. Kind of sad. Then the next day we went to Loch Ness. I'm sorry, that was offensive, I'm sure. And we decided not to take the tour. Our family just wanted to kind of take it easy that day. So we didn't actually go to Urquhart Castle, which is this ruined castle on the shores of the loch. But we did get to see it from up above and take some pictures. Basically, the people who lived here destroyed it themselves to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. So once again, another destroyed castle. Instead, we kind of went to town, and there was this place called Nessieland that had these super derpy little Nessies, and they weren't little, they were quite large, and yeah, they were absurd. So And then we went to a little bakery and had pastries. I really wanted to try banoffee tart because going back to Great British Bake Off or Great British Baking Show, I've heard the term banoffee but never tried it, so I was pretty excited. It was good. So then we went to Dunrobin Castle, which for most of my family, this was their favorite one we visited. This was more Victorian style than Glom's, but another castle that's still used today, so it's very well maintained. I did like how kind of bland the color scheme was, but then like there's all this blue in the clock, so it made it a little interesting. This ticket shows the view from the back, from the gardens. Dunrobin, at least how I saw it, the most incredible thing was really the gardens, not the castle itself. But yeah, I think I was just getting a little tired at this point in the trip, and I'm a big animal lover, so they had a lot of like big cat pelts on the ground, and they actually had an entire taxidermy museum, and it not my cup of tea, but a lot of people really liked it. And then instead of focusing on the taxidermy and whatnot, I just painted some things from the garden, including this little wonky statue and some of the flowers. I don't paint flowers, so this turned out horrible, this black dahlia. But I like the fuchsia. I don't know what this one was, and that was a really cool flower with these weird buds, but I couldn't figure out what that one was called either. The next day, we took a ferry to the Orkney Islands, which are the islands north of Scotland. The far, far north ones are the Shetlands. The ones closer to the mainland are the Orkney Islands. And they were both Norwegian, I believe, sold to Scotland or given to Scotland as a dowry, more or less. But anyway, so we went up to Juno, which is known as the most dismal town in Scotland. And they had this little statue, the nomadic boulders, that was massive and actually really cool looking, but there wasn't much there. I didn't think it seemed too dismal, but I wasn't there very long. From there, we took the ferry. This was the Stroma Lighthouse that we passed on the way. And then we went to the Rings of Brogdar. And basically, they don't fully understand what all of these were used for. These massive stone rings, as you see with Stonehenge and others, obviously had a lot of value to the people who lived there in the old days. How they stood them up. It's just really amazing that they managed this, but there's a lot of unknowns. But yeah, I did actually really like how the spread came out in general. There's just a lot here, and it's simple, but like I liked the rocks and the really faint background. I enjoyed painting the spread a lot, and I really did like the Orkney Islands, even though another dreary day for the most part. But we lucked out. We went to, I should do this in the opposite order, Skye, which, sorry about the glare, is an old habitat where people lived thousands upon thousands of years ago. And their homes were dug into the ground and made of stone and lasted all this time. They actually got buried and then kind of opened up over time again, and they discovered this entire settlement. So while we were there, we're walking around, and there's this beautiful view anyway over the water, but we got this really beautiful rainbow that was reflecting on the wet sand and kind of landing at a small farmhouse or farm style, I'm not sure, but it was such a pretty sight to make up for so much dreary weather. Scotland has so many rainbows, and I didn't expect that because I'm from Florida, so we see so much rain and so many rainbows, but it didn't compare to what we saw in Scotland. So yeah, the Orkney Islands were pretty incredible. Actually, this is a little out of order. Before we went to Brodgar, sorry, I'm going to keep pronouncing that wrong. We went to this Italian chapel. This chapel was created by POWs during World War II. And what they did was they were basically being made to do construction of the Churchill, I have it written down, I'm still forgetting, the Churchill barriers around the islands. And clearly it was made to stop travel and to protect the islands, but they kind of sold it as easing communication island to island. So yeah, a little violation there, but they did allow them some freedoms, so they were able to use the leftover supplies and their the Nissen huts to build this church. So the concrete from the barriers and the beef cans from their foods, they used basically just leftover supplies to build this really pretty chapel. And they actually clearly cared about this place a lot, because even after the war ended, one man actually stayed behind to finish painting and maintain this place, and even came back to finish it up or redo some of the paintings later, and it was really, really pretty. Everything's made of concrete, but they made it look like so much more, and yeah, people are amazing. And then the last stop in the Orkney Islands was St. Magnus Cathedral, which was a really massive and pretty cathedral. We didn't really have much time here. It was just a quick stop at the end of the day because we had to get back to the ferry. So we quickly ran around town and then walked through here, and had I the skill, I probably would have tried to paint more things inside because it was stunning. So the next day was kind of crazy. We spent most of it in the bus, and like I said, I get motion sick, so it was not fun for me. We were there for I don't remember, but we did take this one stop. This is not I didn't have a great view of this. I just wanted to capture it because I love waterfalls, but it's called the Falls of Shin. Kind of in the middle of nowhere. You get to look down at it, so kind of hard to interpret, and unfortunately they were painting the railings, so on top of being motion sick, I can't handle the smell of paint. Paint you would use on railings, and so I didn't really get to enjoy this place too much because you didn't want to accidentally lean on wet paint, and the smell was too much, so we only saw this briefly. Unfortunately, someone in our tour group actually got injured here, not at the falls itself, but she slipped in the parking lot, so we were worried we wouldn't be able to do other things we were supposed to do because we had to wait for an ambulance to come, and we were in the middle of nowhere. But they came, they took care of her, and she was able to continue on with us, so that was really good. This was the place, our last stop for the day, and I was terrified we wouldn't get to go here. This is Eilean Donan Castle, which is this castle on the water. This is outside Isle of Skye on the mainland, and another completely dreary day. We got there, the clouds broke, the sun came through, and we got a beautiful view of it. So I really wanted to do justice. I'm not sure I did, but I put a full page spread for this because I really like this location, and after such a long day of driving or riding, this was such a beautiful sight. And we got back in the bus and went to the Isle of Skye. So, Isle of Skye was a little disappointing, not the island itself. It's absolutely stunning, and I would love to spend more time there. But we only got to be there for such a short period. We got there late, we spent the night, and then the next day we had a tour. And we didn't really get to do much. We just saw different sites and went back to the mainland. So that was unfortunate. This was the first stop, the Old Manor Store, which is this rock here. There's a hiking trail there that I would have loved to do, but I did actually sketch this on site, so yay for doing something on site. And then we went to the waterfall at Kilt Rock. Kilt Rock are these rocks in the background. I'd never seen these cliffs like this before, so I was very happy to finally be able to do so. And then the waterfall was stunning. And once again, I'd like to repaint this. Actually, I owe my mother-in-law a painting of this as a thank you for this trip. And so I really do want to do justice to this piece the next time around because it was such a pretty location. And then we went to the Sligo River just to kind of appreciate this bridge and the mountains around it. It was so relaxing here. We kind of climbed down and sat on the rocks and just enjoyed the cool breeze and the rushing water. And then I really like how the clouds settle on top of mountains. This was just a quick little sketch, but yeah, I really like this place. Afterwards, we went to the Glenfinnan Viaduct. This, not a great painting, but the viaduct itself is very popular because Harry Potter. This is where they filmed the train coming by, and they actually still have that train running here. Unfortunately, it wasn't running that day. It should have been, and for whatever reason, it wasn't, so we didn't get to see that part. But there were some cool flowers, so added that here. And then there was this really nice lake across the road, Loch Shiel, and it was so clear and so calm, and you got that perfect reflection. And there was actually a bench. I guess the water level was unusually high, so there was a bench like here. So I went out and I sat on the bench and just got to be in the middle of the lake, so I had fun. And then people were apparently rushing me out so they can steal my idea. I had waterproof boots, so I got to do stuff like that, and that was a brilliant idea. The next day we drove through the Isle of Mull. We didn't really stop anywhere. Our goal was the Isle of Iona. But while waiting for the ferry on Mull, we got to see this really cute baby Highland cow. If you're not familiar with the Highland cattle, they are really, really hairy. And this one was just right up, happy to have its picture taken. It was so cute. They were right there on the beach. There was also this, actually I paint at the end, so I'll talk about it then. As you know, I really like birds, and I got to see so many birds. I bought a little book to learn about the local birds. I had a blast. So, Isle of Iona, has Iona Abbey, which is the location where they actually apparently started the Book of Kells, which is one of the early fully illustrated religious texts, and it's amazing. I'd love to see it in person. That's in Ireland. They took it out of Scotland to protect it. I mean, this is what they believe now. For a while, they thought it was entirely written in Ireland. Now they think it was just finished there. But this was a really pretty location, still maintained. So and some of these crosses that were there were the original, not in great shape. This one was a reproduction, but they had them in the museum, and it was really cool. And then we walked through, and I did not capture this well at all, but I'd always wanted to see something that was like this, these open courtyards, and it was so pretty. And I really didn't do it justice at all. Once again, I didn't have the skills going into this, and for my next trip, when I want to do a travel journal, I'll be a lot more studied in how to do landscapes and architecture and everything. So the next day, we drove down the west coast, and one of the stops we made was in Glencoe. And it's this valley that's just absolutely stunning. I'd love to go hiking here. The mountains were beautiful. We had a lovely day. I did 2 little sketches for it. This one cracked me up because when I was going through my photos, I found this one. This car belonged to a photographer that was taking pictures in the early morning, and it just looked like a car commercial to me. So my little things that cracked me up. Then we went to Stirling Castle. At this point in the trip, I was really tired, and let's be honest, I was getting easily frustrated. I really wanted to go in and explore. My family really wanted to stay together. So, I don't know. I think I was just being difficult that day. I kept it to myself, I think, but I don't feel like I fully got to explore this location and all like the little, because they had all these exhibits on how they rebuilt or recreated the unicorn tapestries that is super famous here. They also had the known for the sterling heads, which were these massive plates. This is not to scale because but that were hanging up on the ceiling that were painted. There was just a lot to see here, but at the same time I was super tired, so it's all good. We saw a lot, we did a lot, and we did get to go through all the exhibits just very quickly. We took a lot of the time just staying outside so my brother-in-law could take a lot of photos because he loves photography. So we all have our hobbies. It's all good. And then the William Wallace Monument is visible from here. We never really got a good look at it. I was on the opposite side of the bus when we drove closest to it, and then you can only see it so well on a gloomy day. So I just wanted to do a little sketch to remember it, but we didn't. I could have taken a photo from online and gotten more detail in, but this is more how I remember it, so it is what it is. One thing I think the reason I wanted to paint this particular location for Stirling was just because there was a gardener working here and a magpie following him around. Back to the birthing, that brought me so much joy there, watching that chubby little magpie follow him around begging. So then we went to Glasgow. We only really spent 2 evenings in Glasgow. Our trip plans got changed a little bit because our hotels, one of the hotels was, I think 2 of them actually were being worked on, so they shifted our hotels around, and because of that they gave us a free extra tour, which meant we didn't really get to spend time in Glasgow too much, really just the evenings, but that's fine. This amused me. Basically, this is a statue of the Duke of Wellington, and it's become like a tradition in Glasgow to put a cone on his head. So they were explaining to us as we drove up to the site about the cone, and how they, the city tried to stop people from doing it, but they did it anyway. And so we didn't know if we would have a cone on his head when we got there, and then there was a cone on the horse's head too. That may be totally common, but it cracked me up. This is the end of the trip. I am super exhausted at this point. Everything's amusing. And then this was the building this sits under, which I just thought was kind of cool. And then we wandered around. There was a World War I memorial that had these really pretty lion statues on either side. And I can't remember what building this was. We just passed it a couple times, and it was pretty striking. I love these kind of buildings, these towers that they have, probably throughout Europe, but we don't see it that much here outside big cities where they mimic them. The next day, this was the last day of the trip, we went to Bannockburn, which is a site, I have it right here, the site of King of Scots Robert the Bruce's victory over England's army in the First War for Scottish Independence in 1314. So they had another statue for him. He's a big figure in Scotland, so I definitely wanted to capture him somewhere in this book, so this was a great opportunity. And yeah, it was a horrible day again. Complete downpour. Unfortunately, the museum had changed their hours, so we only really got to be outside, which wasn't pleasant, but I'm glad we saw it. Then we went to Doune Castle, which is a site for filming so many things. So if you've seen Outlander, it was there. Monty Python and the Holy Grail was filmed here, and I believe parts of Winterfell in Game of Thrones. So this site actually had multiple tours. They gave you the audio tape, and you could do different tracks depending on which tour you wanted, so that was pretty cool. Once again, we didn't spend much time here, so I just did the basic tour with some of the Monty Python trivia. And then for lunch, we went to this, it's an event for the tour called Be My Guest, and you go to a farm. Ours was Fergus Woods. Oh, my cat just came in, so we're going to get some background noise, I'm sure. So his son played the bagpipes for us as we came in. We got to see their sheepdogs and some of their animals. And then we had kind of a home-cooked Scottish meal. They play traditional music. It was a nice experience to finish off the trip. And then they had, I don't remember how tall it was, but this massive waterfall just in their backyard. At this point, I guess I was just trying to get a little experimental with my brushstrokes, so it's different than I normally paint it, but I kind of like how this came out. So then we went back to Glasgow, and we finally got to go to St. Mungo's Church. Beautiful, massive church there. So we kind of painted it from the front. It was already getting dark. And then we saw it from the back. We went up to the necropolis. Unfortunately, that was closed. We could go up on the hill, but we couldn't go into it. And we got a great view. I very much simplified this. You should be seeing the city of Scotland or city of Glasgow in the background, but I don't have energy for that. I just really wanted to paint the church. We also didn't get to go in here, unfortunately, because, yeah, it was the evening. And then, like I said, we went to the necropolis. Once again, very simplified version of it. Just massive hill full of graves, and yeah, it was interesting. I don't know, I feel weird about going to graveyards. Like I don't know, violating someone else's sacred space. But it was a really interesting place. And then this was just some of the buildings that were off to the side. And that's pretty much it. So this was the hooded crow I vaguely referenced earlier. There was a hooded crow that followed us around in Mull. It was very photogenic. It acted like it just wanted its picture taken. I'm sure it was expecting to be fed. But yeah, this bird was super entertaining. So yeah, I guess that's all I have for this. That's pretty much that is the whole sketchbook. So yeah, I talked enough. I very much need water now. But yeah, so if you have any questions about any place in here or want to know more, please feel free to contact me in the comments or private message me. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little peek of the sketchbook, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you. Bye. Well, now that I got some water, I realized that I didn't cover this little sketchbook, another part of my Scotland experience. So I thought I would just flip through this real quick. This was a little tiny, obviously, 2x2 sketchbook I bought in St. Andrews. And I mentioned I'm a huge fan of birds, so I wanted to paint some of the birds I saw. This is a Hannah Muley sketchbook. Also, while I'm at it, I'm just going to kind of flip through this real quick. It's a zigzag sketchbook. I should have said this earlier, but I should give a massive thank you through this video too to my amazing family, my in-laws, who brought us on this incredible trip to Scotland. I should have said that at the beginning. It was very much a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I am so grateful that they brought us with them on this amazing trip. Alright, so I think that's actually it this time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're doing well. Thanks again. Bye.